defend their achievements against Republican assault. Joining me now is Congressman Chris Van Hollen, former head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and now the ranking minority party member on the House Budget Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good to be with you, Lawrence.
Now, we just heard in our first segment from a new Tea Party member of the House, Allen West, sounding very suddenly, like a politician trying to spin his way out of a promise. In this case, the spending cut of $100 billion in the first year. Did you think the Republicans would be retreating from that promise on day one?
I did not, and I caught a little piece of that last interview, and we've been hearing it all day now, excuses for what has been a dramatic scaling back in what was a campaign pledge, a pledge laid out in their blueprint for America. And what's happening is the reality of the budget process is catching up with that rhetoric, because people are finally figuring out that when you're talking about slashing the budget as much as they've been talking about over a short period of time, you are impacting the lives of people in a very negative way. You're either cutting their early education money, you're getting rid of college loans, you're denying money to the NIH to do research into finding cures and treatments for cancers and diabetes and other kind of diseases. And people are finding out that it's one thing to talk about these things in the abstract. It's a whole nother thing to talk about hurting people in their daily lives.
Can you take us through the new House rules that John Boehner has been talking about, and are they important? Do they affect the way the House will operate? Do they, in any real and important ways, inhibit the minority and now the Democrat strength in the House?
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because Speaker Boehner in his opening comments said all the right things about trying to find common ground, but unfortunately within 2 hours of that statement, the Republicans brought their rules package to the floor that really calls into question a lot of statements they were making on the campaign trail for the last 4 months, especially as it relates to the deficit and reducing the debt. You know very well from your time on Capitol Hill that rules, especially in the House, set the blueprint for action. And what they did in this rule, with no hearings or anything else, is gut the existing provisions that relate to PAYGO. And those rules currently said, at least before today, that if you're going to increase the deficit by adding a new program, maybe in education, you have to pay for it, as you should. The rules used to say that if you added to the deficit by providing a big tax break for hedge fund managers or from some special interests that had great lobbyists in Washington, that you also had to pay for that. Today, the Republicans said when it comes to special interest tax breaks, they don't count. You don't have to pay for them. And under the statutory PAYGO rule, they were going to allow the chairman of the Budget Committee to substitute his own budget estimate for that of the Congressional Budget Office, which is, of course, the nonpartisan sort of umpire that calls the balls and strikes on the budget. That is a huge politicization of the budget accounting process. I mean, that is substituting Enron-style accounting for the professionals at the Congressional Budget Office, and opens up a very dangerous door, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible to stress to the public enough just how shocking that is, the idea of abandoning CBO's impartial budgeting scoring that they've done, that both sides don't like. No one's ever happy with the way it scores, but CBO always does their best to say, okay, one party is going to make that decision from now on, is absolutely shocking. On the health care repeal, Congressman, the Republicans going to be allowed to have a clean vote on health care repeal in the House, or will you in any way be able to amend it or attach to that vote the opportunity for some Republican House members to vote to retain some portions of the bill that we know many Republicans actually favor?
Well, first of all, this bill will come to the floor of the House 1 week from today. By all accounts, there are going to be no hearings. We're not going to have an opportunity to hear from many of the people who are beginning to benefit from the patient protections that were in the health care reform bill. You know, whether they're seniors who are having their prescription drug benefits enhanced and not falling into the donut hole, or families that have kids with pre-existing conditions who now can get health insurance. We're not going to hear from any of those folks. And it also looks like, despite their pledge of openness, full debate, there's not going to be an opportunity for Democrats to have any amendments. We'll find out. We're all going to go to the Rules Committee tomorrow, and people will offer the amendments that they want to make an order on the floor of the House. But every indication we've got is that those amendments will not be made in order. And on the budgeting point, the rule that passed today said that you can totally ignore the Congressional Budget Office's estimate of the impact on the deficit of repealing health care reform, because despite all the misinformation out there, there were provisions in that bill that will, over time, reduce the costs of health care to the government. And CBO has said that that comes to a little over $100 billion in the first 10 years and a little over $1 trillion in the second 10 years. Under the rule the Republicans passed today, and I don't know if, Allen West and the Tea Party guys realized what they were doing. They said, we're not going to care about what the CBO said. We're going to substitute our own estimates.
Congressman Chris Van Hollen, Democrat of Maryland, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and good luck this year. I know there are few things in Washington more frustrating than being a member of the minority in the House of Representatives.
You're right about that, Lawrence. Thanks.
Thank you.